To understand Bitcoin, you have to be open to the idea that the current financial system is not perfect. Every day we breathe air, which is critical to our survival, but we rarely think about it. It's only when something changes that we start paying attention. In this video, we'll build on what we've already learned about the evolution of money, technology, and cryptography, and how all of them eventually led to Bitcoin. We'll move quickly through history, then focus on how Bitcoin actually works today. We'll talk about some of the broader implications for society, and we'll address a few of the most common critiques and misconceptions about the network. So let's get started. Historians and analysts have long observed that financial systems and the powers behind them don't remain dominant forever. Neil Ferguson's The Ascent of Money traces how shifts in financial innovation helped drive the rise and fall of great powers throughout history. Meanwhile, Ray Dalio, in Principles for Dealing with the Changing World Order, argues that world powers tend to rise and decline in long cyclical arcs, often lasting around a century. It's easy to point to 1944 and the Bretton Woods Agreement as the beginning of the current US dollar era, and to recognize that today's economic tensions have clear historical parallels. Until the Nixon shock in 1971, when the United States formally left the gold standard, money issuance was largely constrained by external, natural limits, systems designed to impose discipline on sovereign issuers. Bitcoin can be understood as an attempt to reintroduce constraint, not through physical commodities like gold, but through code, cryptography, and a decentralized security network. The invention of the electric telegraph in the 1830s marked a profound shift in human coordination. For the first time in history, information, and therefore commerce, could move at the speed of an electron. Money, however, could not. Much of the modern financial system was built to solve that gap, to move value across distance as efficiently as possible, given the constraints of the time. But even after the invention of the computer and the modern internet, money itself has struggled to keep pace with how fast information now moves. At its core, Bitcoin is an attempt to move value digitally, verifiably, definitively, and without requiring trust in a central third party. At this point, it's important to pause and clear up a common misunderstanding. Bitcoin is often talked about as if it's a thing, a coin, an asset, a ticker symbol on a screen. But at a deeper level, Bitcoin is not a coin, it's a network. More specifically, Bitcoin is a global system for recording and verifying ownership, a public ledger anyone can inspect and no single party controls. If money is information, then Bitcoin is a new way of handling that information. Instead of relying on banks, payment processors, or governments to keep the ledger, Bitcoin distributes that responsibility across thousands of independent participants around the world. These participants are called nodes. You can think of nodes as independent accountants or librarians. Each one keeps a full copy of the Bitcoin ledger, and each one independently checks that the rules are being followed. No single node is in charge, and none have special privileges. When someone sends Bitcoin to someone else, what's actually happening is not a coin moving through space. What's happening is a change in the ledger, a reassignment of ownership that the network agrees on. Bitcoin tracks ownership using something called UTXOs, or unspent transaction outputs. That sounds technical, but the idea is simple. Think of a UTXO as a sealed envelope containing value. When you spend Bitcoin, you're not shaving pieces off of a balance. You're taking one or more envelopes, proving you have the right to open them, and creating new envelopes for the recipient and, if needed, for yourself as change. This design makes ownership precise, auditable, and difficult to fake, which turns out to be very important in a digital system where copying is otherwise trivial. But a ledger alone isn't enough. The network also needs a way to agree on when changes happen and which version of history is the real one. That is where mining comes in. Mining is often misunderstood as creating Bitcoin, but its more important role is securing the ledger and anchoring it in time. Miners compete to package recent transactions into blocks, and they do so by performing computational work that is costly, measurable, and difficult to fake. This process is called proof of work. Proof of work turns electricity and computation into a kind of digital timestamp. It makes rewriting history increasingly expensive the further back you go. In other words, it's not just about speed, it's about finality and irreversibility. As a reward for securing the network, new Bitcoin is issued according to a fixed, predictable schedule. This is how Bitcoin governs its monetary supply, not by committee, not by discretion, but by rules enforced by the network itself. And just as importantly, nodes verify that those rules are always being followed. If a miner tries to cheat by creating too much Bitcoin or breaking the rules, nodes simply reject their work. This balance between miners and nodes is what keeps Bitcoin decentralized. No one group can change the system on its own. Taken together, Bitcoin isn't a company, a product, or even a promise. It's a protocol, more like the internet itself than a traditional financial instrument. One of the most unusual things about Bitcoin is that it doesn't just record transactions, it also governs the money itself. In most monetary systems, the rules are set and changed by people. Central banks decide how much money exists, when more is created, and under what conditions those decisions can change. Bitcoin takes a very different approach. Instead of trusting people or institutions to manage the money, Bitcoin embeds its monetary rules directly into the system, and then distributes enforcement of those rules across the network. A helpful way to think about this is a machine with a built-in governor. Imagine an engine, like a golf cart, with a mechanical governor that limits how fast it can spin. No operator can override it on a whim. The constraint isn't a promise, it's part of the machinery. Bitcoin's money supply works the same way. New Bitcoin is issued as part of the mining process, but the rate of issuance is fixed in advance, with a preset cap of 21 million Bitcoin. Roughly every 10 minutes, a new block is added to the ledger, and with it comes a known, predefined amount of new Bitcoin. About every 4 years, the issuance rate is automatically cut in half. This is known as the halving. No committee votes on it, no emergency meeting is called. It happens whether anyone wants it to or not. You can think of this like a metronome, ticking steadily in the background, keeping time regardless of the noise around it. But what keeps that timing steady in the real world, where computers turn on and off and mining power constantly changes? That's where the difficulty adjustment comes in. Bitcoin continuously measures how fast blocks are being produced, and every couple of weeks, it automatically adjusts how hard mining is. If more miners join, the system makes the work harder. If miners leave, it makes the work easier. This functions like a thermostat. When the room gets too hot, the system cools it down. When it gets too cold, it warms it up. No one has to intervene. The feedback loop is built in. Together, these mechanisms ensure that Bitcoin's supply grows in a predictable, rule-based way, independent of politics, economic cycles, or human discretion. That doesn't make Bitcoin perfect, but it does make it predictable. And in monetary systems, predictability is a feature, not a bug. One of the most common critiques of Bitcoin is that it has no intrinsic value. This usually shows up as a question: what is it actually backed by? It's a fair question, but it's also the wrong frame. The idea of intrinsic value comes from a physical world, where value is tied to material properties. But many of the most valuable systems today derive their value not from what they're made of, but from what they do. The internet isn't valuable because of copper or silicon. GPS isn't valuable because satellites are made of metal. They're valuable because they work reliably, predictably, and at scale. Bitcoin belongs in this category of systems. Its value comes from function. A useful analogy is a lock. A lock isn't valuable because of the metal it's made from. It's valuable because it reliably does its job. Bitcoin is a lock on digital value. Another way to think about it is as a clock. A clock isn't valuable because of its gears. It's valuable because everyone can agree on the time. Bitcoin provides a shared sense of monetary time, when value moved, in what order, and under what rules. Bitcoin is a monetary protocol. Its value comes from reliability, predictability, and verification, not physical backing. Some critics take this further and argue that a fixed supply would be deflationary and incompatible with modern economies. That is an important question, and we'll address it shortly, but it's separate from whether Bitcoin has value at all. Another common critique is that Bitcoin uses too much energy. The most important thing to understand is this: the single biggest input cost in Bitcoin mining is electricity, by far. That fact shapes everything. Miners are constantly pushed toward the cheapest energy available, which is often energy that's underutilized, remote, or difficult to transport. Think hydroelectric dams far from cities, wind farms with excess generation, solar projects that overproduce during the day, natural gas that would otherwise be flared. Bitcoin mining is location agnostic. It only needs power and an internet connection. You can think of mining as a buyer of last resort for electricity. It turns energy that might otherwise be wasted into economic output. This can make renewable energy projects viable when they wouldn't be otherwise. Mining can absorb excess generation when it exists and shut down when it doesn't. In that sense, it acts like a flexible load, a shock absorber, if you will, for energy grids. Proof of work makes energy use explicit. It turns electricity into security, into a measurable cost for making the ledger difficult to attack and expensive to rewrite. You can think of it as the cost of truth. The real question isn't whether Bitcoin uses energy. It's what that energy is securing. Today, the word crypto has drifted away from its roots in cryptography and engineering, and is now commonly associated with dubious or poorly constructed forms of digital money. But this is a category error. Email scams don't make the internet a scam. Bitcoin is a single network with a fixed rule set. It has no CEO, no marketing department, and no insiders who can change the rules. Most scams rely on trusting people. Bitcoin removes that trust. Confusing the two is like blaming email for phishing scams. Another serious critique of Bitcoin is that it's too rigid, and a fixed money supply would be deflationary, and that deflation is incompatible with a modern credit-based economy. This concern is grounded in reality. Modern economies run on credit. Loans create deposits. Deposits fund spending. And growth is tightly intertwined with the expansion and contraction of credit. In that world, money is expected to be elastic. It's expected to expand when the economy grows and contract during periods of stress, or at least that's the goal. Bitcoin doesn't work that way. Bitcoin has a fixed and predictable supply. What fluctuates is not the number of units, but their value. That distinction is critical. A useful analogy here is land. The amount of land in Manhattan is fixed. The city doesn't create more land during economic booms, and it doesn't destroy land during recessions. Instead, the price of land adjusts based on demand, productivity, and how people choose to use it. And yet, land still supports an enormous credit system. People borrow against it. Developers build on it. Banks issue mortgages using it as collateral. The fixed nature of land doesn't prevent credit from forming on top of it. It simply means the adjustment happens through price, not supply. Bitcoin is similar. Its supply doesn't respond to economic conditions, but credit can still be built on top of it. What changes is that the base layer itself remains constant. Another helpful analogy is a measuring stick. Imagine trying to build a complex structure using a ruler that subtly changes length depending on economic conditions. You might still be able to build, but uncertainty creeps into the foundation, literally. Bitcoin is an attempt to create a ruler that doesn't change length, even as the economy around it expands, contracts, and reorganizes. That doesn't eliminate credit. It doesn't prevent risk-taking, and it doesn't guarantee stability. What it does separate is money from policy. In today's system, credit expansion effectively is money creation. Bitcoin draws a clearer line between the two, allowing credit to exist but anchoring the base monetary unit to a fixed set of rules. This doesn't mean Bitcoin is a perfect solution, or that it should replace existing systems. It means it offers an alternative foundation, one where adjustment happens through price and behavior rather than supply discretion. And that difference matters, especially in a world where leverage, incentives, and trust are increasingly complex. You don't need to agree with Bitcoin to take it seriously. But if money is information, and information systems are changing faster than ever, then Bitcoin is worth understanding. We're entering a world shaped by artificial intelligence, where systems act and coordinate faster than institutions can adapt. In that world, the way value moves matters. Bitcoin is one of the first serious attempts to build money native to the information age. Curiosity is enough. If you want to keep exploring how money works, you're in the right place. I'll see you in the next one, and stay curious about money.